Hi, everyone. This is the Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing of some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself in the stories my guests tell about times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Before we start the show, I wanted to mention that we have a heart-based leadership bootcamp that we are offering. You can check it out at our website at customerfanatics.com/boot-camp. Today, I'm very thrilled to be speaking with Eric Jacobsen, the Senior Vice President of Operations for Extraction Oil and Gas. Enjoy. Well, hello, and thank you for joining the Leadership with Heart podcast. This is Heather Younger, your host. I'm super excited to have Eric Jacobsen on the phone today. He is really an inspiring leader. I work closely with the organization that he is the lead of operations for, and have had great exchanges with him, but also, and more importantly, with the people that he leads. And in my work, kind of facilitating some employee focus groups and the training and things I do with his organization, I have heard multiple times how the people are excited when he walks in the door. They feel like there's a warmth that exists in him, that he knows their name. He knows what they do. He pays attention to them and really makes them feel important. And this is really the essence of a leader with heart. So Eric, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Heather. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and it's a pleasure to be on the phone here today and share whatever bits I can that might be helpful.
Thank you so much. So where are you at right now in your leadership journey?
Well, at the moment, I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations for Extraction Oil and Gas. It's a wonderful oil and gas exploration and development company. It was formed in about 2012, not long ago. We just went public less than 2 years ago. We're on the NASDAQ ticker as XOG, and we've amassed in about 5 or 6 years the third largest acreage position in the state of Colorado, focused in the wonderful and highly economic and fruitful DJ Basin. And it's been just nothing short of a privilege and a pleasure to be the Senior Vice President for Extraction, leading a team of 190 or so people out of a company that has about 260 today. I have about 11 direct reports across the oil and gas development chain, and I have just nothing short of a fantastic leadership team that I enjoy working with every single day as we pursue this journey to be the operator of choice in Colorado on all fronts: stewardship, safety, regulatory, economics and financials, and really just working closely with every community to be that, as I said, operator of choice as we move forward in developing resources in Colorado.
Love it. I love it. You know, it's, I know for people listening, and there could be folks that have opinions one way or another, but it's interesting for me to be talking to someone, and I'm talking about leadership with heart, and we're talking about someone who's one of the leaders of an organization for oil and gas. And yes, leaders with heart exist everywhere. There are people with just, great focuses on other people, the people that are external to the organization, the people that are internal to the organization, everywhere. So, you're just a perfect example of this. And this is just another kind of tenet of the depth of the podcast I have, because I bring people in from literally just all walks, large organizations, smaller, nonprofit, for-profit. I mean, it runs the gamut. So I'm really excited to have you. So tell me what it is that, what drives you to lead? Is there something, did it come from some place? Because I've seen your style and you get things done. So what drives you to lead?
Well, I guess the headline, Heather, is from a young age, I've always loved to succeed as a team where I have a leadership role and every member of the team not only succeeds together, but grows individually. whatever it is that was built inside me from an early age, I just have always loved to succeed together and to watch everybody else grow and benefit individually as well as a team. And there have been teams that I've been captain or leader of back to high school and college football and basketball, to some multinational teams abroad in Algeria and Azerbaijan, to the fantastic team we have at Extraction Oil and Gas, where when I really look back at my career, that's what I'm most proud of, is the moments of success we had together, where we delivered something remarkably, we overcame odds, we grew closer together, everybody grew and developed as an individual, and as a team we still have those fond memories of what it felt like to succeed and overcome those odds and deliver remarkable results together.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's, everybody has a different reason. Sometimes it's like, well, my mother was a real influence. My father was in the military. There's all the reasons. And it's funny because there was one other person, for some reason, I cannot for the life think of me. Oh, I know. It was the CEO of US Swim. I interviewed him, and he talked about the role that being in sports, his kind of whole life played in his leadership style. And so, you going back to high school and college and football and thinking about, I do think that sports plays a huge part in forming leaders, the futures. And sometimes, we don't take that as seriously as we should, but I think it really does.
I think athletics athletics or other extracurricular activities, whether it's band or debate or drum, everybody has something that kind of helped kickstart their leadership style, I think, and formative years as a leader. And for me, it was sports. And I can really point to, several individuals in my athletic career as well as my professional career who I took something from people that I admired. I was always on the lookout for leaders for whom they had a quality something to admire. Denny Humphrey, my high school basketball coach, he was the number 5 most winning coach of all time. He did it with a bunch of kids who didn't have a lot of talent, but they just outworked people. And he was tough, but he was fair, and he was really a wonderful man. He cared about every player, but he just had this knack of getting the most out of people. Bob Green, who was one of the most influential men in my life, he was my college football coach at Montana Tech. And he's one of the most inspirational, positive, high energy, great people you'll ever meet in your life. He's a 1 in a million type of person. When he retired, ESPN even said, "Please don't retire, coach. You're the greatest," quote, in college football. Mm-hmm. And he just had this way of combining humor and energy and positivity and never give up sort of attitude to yield great results. And I've been so fortunate in my career, people like Chuck Jones in my formative years at Vastar Resources, who had just this way of connecting with people. He'd always say, if you want to catch fish, you have to cast amongst them. And Chuck would go around and talk to people, and he'd gather his thoughts and listening to people, and then that helped form his decision. And he did it in a very sort of easy manner, and people connected with him. Sandy Stacks, a wonderful leader who became a superstar in the oil patch across the world. She just had really high energy and drive and passion for what she did. And I watched her and how she succeeded and how she navigated through really difficult times in an environmental cleanup operation, and did it so expertly and still maintained her credibility and respect. And Donnie Moore, who's now the COO of Gulfport Energy, just a fantastic oil man and a people person. He had a calm, easy demeanor about him. He knew the business inside and out. He knew how to connect with people and just get things done in the most fluid, seamless fashion of anybody I've ever met. And I can go on and on. Matt Forster, he's a British manager that I worked with in Algeria. Never seen anybody that can bring teams together and listen to people's voices like Matt Forster. So I've really acknowledged leaders throughout my life in sports and professional career. And I've tried to, not always successfully, but I've tried to take whatever I could from each one of them in their specific regards and fortes.
Wow. That was awesome. Thank you for that. There was a couple of things that came to mind when you were saying all of that. One is, with leaders, people are watching you all the time, whether you know it, want them to, or whatever. They're watching from a distance. And you were intelligent enough to kind of take all of the great things, these just amazing things. And they were all different leadership styles. So there was some energy in most of them, but it sounded like there was some other things that made them all diverse in their own right, but you respected them nonetheless. And so leaders don't all take, it's not a one size fits all. It's not a cookie cutter type of role that you play. And it's okay to be different from the next guy, but it's also okay to say, I'm going to emulate this next guy or girl, right? And to say, I want to be a little bit more like them. So I can appreciate that you have really been a student of great leaders and paying attention and taking it. And I definitely, again, based upon what I've heard, because I do listen to the folks there at Extraction, I can see that you do a really good job of doing some of these things you just talked about and these other leaders, connecting with people, that energy and the positivity and growing people and things like that. So that's awesome. I appreciate that. So was there ever a time that you can think about, maybe just share a specific story that you can remember that you were like, I just was not the best leader I could be, and what happened specifically? And then also, what did you do to kind of put yourself on the right path again and get back on track? What was the thing that you actually did?
I'm sure if you interviewed folks who had worked for me over the years, they can think of an awful lot of examples of where I wasn't a very good leader, but there's one that sticks out to me that I think shaped me fairly early on in my professional career. I was the superintendent over a number of platforms in the offshore Gulf of Mexico, and I was stationed at an office onshore in Venice, Louisiana, the tip of the boot of Louisiana. Wonderful place, combination of oil workers and shrimpers. And there's only one way to get out of Venice, and that's make a U-turn, because it's the Gulf of Mexico from there. And I loved the job. I was working for Donnie Moore, who I had mentioned earlier, and it was hurricane season. And there was, as there always is in our business, there's pressure to produce and there's pressure to keep costs down. But hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico, or anywhere else for that matter, as I think most people know, especially those who have experienced them, are nothing to mess around with. So it came time that a hurricane had entered the Gulf and we needed to evacuate all of these platforms. And so I was kind of at central control with our dispatcher and logistics people, and we were getting folks off the platforms. And I guess the long and short of it is I waited too long, trying to produce too much and trying to shave costs. And there was a specific group of people that I'll never forget. There were about 5 of them, and I know who they are. And I waited too long to get them off, and I should have got a helicopter out, but I was, trying to shave a bit of cost, and we did a boat instead, and they had a hard time getting on the boat because of the hurricane tide had started to come in, and the waves were starting to accelerate, and they had a rough boat ride in, and they did make it, and they made it safely, and all 5 of them came to my office and gave me a rightful bollocking, as the Brits would say, and I deserved it. And at that point in time, I reflected, and I was really disappointed in myself. And at that point in time, I'd made the decision, there will always be pressure to produce and produce at low cost. That is part of our business, and that's what our companies hire us to do. But never, ever should that sacrifice the importance of caring for the health, safety, and well-being of your people. The safety and well-being of people comes first and foremost. And, I've tried to carry on that, remember that, and carry that on in everything I've done. It is always, it's a constant challenge and a reminder, because the realities of the business world face you every day, that it's people, it's safety, it's cost, it's quality, it's production. You have to manage all 5 of those all the time. They never go away. But the top of the rack, what always comes to the top is the safety and well-being of people. And I always have to go back to that and never forget that. And I think over time, I hope it's become, more or less just the value of who I am as a leader. But it's really easy, especially as a young leader like I was in my late 20s back then, to get caught up in, we got to make our targets, we got to make our production, we got to make our costs, and sacrifice a bit the people and safety element for it, when in fact those are number one, period, all the time, first and foremost, no question.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So how is it that, because like you said, the pressures never stop. How is it that you keep centered on that when there's pressures from the board and pressures from there's just pressures everywhere to say, listen, safety's first. I mean, how do you keep centered in that focus? Because I know how fast things move. I see it myself. So.
Well, I think there's probably several things. One is, as a leader, you fast come to the realization that without people, motivated, loyal, quality people, the rest of it can't happen. The production, the cost, the rest doesn't matter if you don't have wonderful, talented, loyal people delivering the business day in and day out. And I've been super fortunate in my career to have just, dozens and dozens of those incredible people that I've been lucky enough to work with and lead. And I think that the other piece is, as a leader, and especially in the oil and gas business, and especially in Colorado, our license to operate is at stake. If we can't operate safely, if we can't send our people home and our contractors and our vendors and all of those who we work with and alongside and our stakeholders, if we can't be safe and we can't make sure that their lives they're sent home every night after work or their shift the same way they came or better, then again, our license to operate and our ability to be a successful company is severely compromised. So it's about and then I guess third is just really is about just caring for people. You'd want somebody to lead your son or daughter or niece or nephew in a way that makes sure that they're safe and that their well-being is being looked out for. So it's about just that center on people first and foremost. It's about the fact that you can't deliver without engaged, satisfied, healthy people. And it's about the fact that your company might be compromised. So it's on several different levels. It's kind of the heart, it's kind of the heart, the delivery, and the company all in one. That brings you to realize that it really is about making sure people, the well-being, satisfaction, and engagement of people being first and foremost.
It's interesting that you said that, the combination of, the heart, delivery, and the company. I think in any business, and obviously this one, there's a special safety component, but in any business, making sure that heart is present, but there's a lot of things that they might not feel very heart oriented. Like, when we're in business, we have to make sure there are processes and procedures. We have to, make sure that we follow rules or we comply, whether it's a safety issue or not. We might have to talk to our people and kind of coach them to self-correct something that they're doing or failing to do that might be harming the business or their coworkers. So I think that while I talk about heart, this is not all about just heart on the sleeve squishing us here. Sometimes heart is having those tough conversations. Sometimes it's coaching them out of kind of a caring or out of a deep respect for them to improve or to change. So it's just one of the points I wanted to make, and I think you kind of brought that to bear here in this conversation. So what happens, because things move quickly. I mean, there's a lot of pressures, everybody's spread out. What do you do as a leader to try to reconnect with your team, particularly the direct reports you have? I know how you are when you go out in the field and how you connect with people, but maybe even just like the 11 direct reports you have, how do you reconnect with them, stay connected in a deeper way?
I think that, it is all about, you have to make sure there's enough face time. Both individually and together. And with 11 people, it is extremely challenging because there's also elements of, all the external stakeholder relations with government and regulatory agencies and local communities, local governments, landowners, mineral owners, analysts, investors, boards of directors, executives, et cetera. So there's all sorts of interfaces we need. But with my direct reports, I make every effort to always have a weekly meeting where every person has their priorities and their voices heard, and we hit the key topics as a team where everybody can listen to each other and see where they fit in. So I do have a weekly staff meeting, and then I have individual meetings with several, sometimes all of my reports on a weekly or every other weekly basis, where we sit down in some capacity for, sometimes it's just informal, sometimes it's a 30-minute scheduled meeting where we sit down one-on-one to dive a bit deeper into their people and their piece of it. By the way, when I mentioned my staff meeting weekly, I also invite key stakeholders from other departments that don't report to me. HR for one, the geologic department. So there are a couple of key stakeholders. The accounting team, our chief accounting officer sometimes attends. So there are key stakeholders that I also bring in to make sure that full collaboration and that full communication on the priority topics at hand in our business are being conveyed and communicated regularly. Then I go into the individual meetings, whether it's formal, informal, weekly, or biweekly. And then there's, wherever I can, and this is where when I lose center on my leadership, I always come back to kind of the Chuck Jones thing I mentioned earlier. If you want to catch fish, you have to cast amongst them. They're just wandering around with people and pop in their office and talking to them in the coffee bar or the hallways or their office or whatnot. So I try and connect on those several levels, and it's really just, and when I do, it's about, listening to them, but where needed, conveying, some key messages. And I'd say in all of those interactions, it's a combination of really intently listening on what they have to say and what their points and issues are. And at the same time, where I have something to convey, I make sure that it's done, concisely and pointedly. So okay. That's sort of, there's no magic to it. It's really, interactions.
I agree with you.
Quality
yes.
interactions.
Yeah, and you also do a couple retreats a year too. So that's the other thing you do to kind of let them, collaborate, share ideas, grow, and learn together. So it's good that you have that focus. One of the things that I was thinking of when you were talking about inviting key stakeholders in, a lot of times what happens, which I think is a mistake, and what you're doing is the great thing, is that we have these team meetings or we get in kind of like these silos and we're just focused on what we're doing, what our impact is, what our bottom line is. And we aren't looking holistically at the organization, at the big team, the big T, right? Instead of the small team. And so by you bringing in all these other cross-functional areas, not only do you emulate to your people that it's important to not just like make decisions in a silo, but to bring other folks in cross-functionally. But I think you also highlight that you have a big focus on what the big team is doing and how you're all kind of interrelated. This is key when we talk about loyalty. People usually want to know what it is that they do every day connects to all the other components inside the business and how it impacts that. And they want to just know about their coworkers. So when you're bringing other people in, you're making them feel a part of it. You're making them feel important, like they have a voice in the matter, like they're not just being told what is about to happen, but they have a say. So there's a lot of good things I think you're emulating by doing this cross-functional thing. I hope more people do that. And I hope those listening in, leaders, know to, don't be afraid to invite other folks into the mix when you have your meetings, because that just expands the impactfulness that you can have in your organization anyway. So that's good stuff.
Sure. Heather, if you don't mind, just a comment on that. I think there's a difficult balance to strike. I think what you said is absolutely critical. That greater brain, that bigger team, the broader collaboration is so critical, especially among complicated businesses, which so many are, where every link in the chain must work together on time and with quality in order for us to meet our targets and grow our company and maximize value and all that. There is a point, though, however, where not everybody can know everything. It's just impossible in the efficiency of communications and organizations. There's sort of a balance in bringing everybody together and then individual teams doing their bit on the link of the chain to deliver their part too, where they all come together. So I don't know exactly what that balance is. I struggle with it sometimes. We do the weekly meetings where we bring multiple stakeholders in. The other thing we do is twice a year, and you're involved in these, Heather, we bring the broader leadership team together, all the key stakeholders, and we develop our targets and objectives that are then approved by the board of directors that we're held to each year. And then we check in on those at the beginning of at the midpoint of the year and the end of the year. So I think there's something on that broader team of developing our targets together, holding each other accountable to those, reviewing progress at some level of frequency, but not too frequent. And then we can all own it. We all know what our roles are within it, and we can all measure and manage against it. So I think there's something about that too that's important. One of the other great leaders that I've observed in my life, Don Hatcher, told me that I'll always remember that most organizational chaos comes from lack of role clarity. So I think we bring people together, we collaborate, we build these plans together, and then everybody goes away understanding what their role is or their link in the chain is, to put it another way, in order to deliver the business.
That's a very good point. One of the things I struggled with, I really, to be honest, in the majority of my leadership career, was having more expansive view. So I tend to be someone who is a big picture thinker, like I can connect the dots really well. So whenever I felt like I was missing a portion of the dots, let's say, I felt like left out, and I was always wanting to know more. And I mean, a lot of people in the organizations, a lot of employees do want to connect. When I've had focus groups all over in different organizations, and most of them are like, I don't even know what's going on in this department or that department. And so they want to know at a high level for sure what's happening and what projects that might be, touching them. But I have to say, from my personal perspective as a leader, I kind of struggled with wanting to know more, and maybe I wanted to know too much, because in the end, I needed to know what I needed to know in order to be effective, with what I was doing, let's say at a director level or whatever. So it's interesting that you bring that point up. The other thing is, I do agree with you on this idea of like there's could be an overkill on trying to kind of cross collaborate too much, because in the end we do have to drive the bus forward, our own buses forward, so that the big bus can go forward. So you have to have that focus, and that role clarity is a part of that. So I know my role is, now let's come together and talk about how each of our roles impact each other and how we're going to hold each other accountable. But in the end, we have to go back to our roles. We still have to commit to producing. So I get that point. I can see where that would be a fine balance for sure. For leaders that might be listening right now, that could be, just having some struggles, with just being a leader, like in that leadership role, what would be some tips for that you would like to leave them with? Something that would just be, maybe impactful for them. It could be some tactical things. It could be some mindset things. Just, you've already given us a lot by talking about the leaders who impacted you. There's some good stuff. But is there something you'd like to leave them with?
I think that is the primary thing that I would suggest to leaders is, pay attention to those who you admire, ask for their advice, observe them, pick up tendencies and characteristics that you admire, that you think that are suitable for your style. And I think the care and attention there is, don't change who you are, or trying to be somebody, be insincere about it, or try and modify your personality necessarily. But behaviors, characteristics, and traits that you admire, you can blend in with your own style. Look at other leaders, ask their advice, and realize that everybody goes through these leadership struggles. And I think the other piece of that, in order to do that effectively, that observation and application, you have to be honest with yourself, and sometimes swallow a pill pretty hard, as I had to do in that example in the Gulf of Mexico, where I really was a poor leader and I didn't have my priorities straight with people. Keep your people at the forefront, give them the care and attention that they deserve for their own health and well-being and career development, and continuously improve by observing others. So that would be, I guess, what I'd leave folks with, Heather. Thank you.
Awesome. That's great. Okay. Well, so for anybody who might want to be getting a hold of you, follow up with you, I'm not sure if they ever do this, but what's the one way that they might want to follow up with you?
You could, I think I'd welcome them to get a hold of you, and you could check in with Laura, my assistant, and we could make a connection if we needed to.
Awesome. That sounds like a good. And what I'll do for those who listen, and his information will be in the show notes. So I'll make sure that I'll just put that note that you can contact me, and we'll go through that route if you wanted to chat with him. But this has been awesome. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, anybody listening in to rate and review this podcast if you did in fact like it. Then leaders are able to find it more easily the more that it's rated and reviewed on iTunes especially. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.